If this cell had a life cycle of perhaps 3 days, and this was very normal for this particular type of cell, and so it decided, I am not going to fulfill my service. I am not going to act in a way which is in service to the greater whole. Because what is the point? What is happening within this greater whole in 5 days from now is completely irrelevant to me, because I will be gone in 3 days. So I will live just totally narcissistically focused on myself. If the cell was to live this way, and all the other cells within this organism were to live this way, you could see there would be absolute chaos within the expanded organism. And there would be problems, serious problems, with the health of this larger organism, to the point where the larger organism would not be able to function, and eventually would cease to be, because of this total incoherence and uncooperation of the individual components within. This cell, in its very limited view, its very narcissistic and self-focused perspective, is looking very much at the short term and is behaving as if unaware that it shall perish, but it shall be recycled and return as a new cell, regenerated, reincarnated, to once again be part of the larger organism. However, when it returns, because of the way that it lived prior in these earlier incarnations, it will return to an organism which is in chaos. Therefore, it will live a chaotic life. It will live a life which is steeped in suffering and problems. And it will ask, why? How did this happen? Why do I have to be cursed this way, that I'm born into this toxic environment? But of course, this is because hello, it's nice to be here doing my regular wisdom channeling this week. Missed out last week because just so busy doing lots of private channels for the wonderful people in this community. If you haven't read this book yet, then I highly recommend you do. I'm continuing to get feedback from readers saying that this was really one of the best books they've read. Some people are literally saying that's one of the greatest books they've ever read in their life, and they're an avid reader, which is such a high praise and something I'm very blessed to hear. So this is available in paperback, you can see here, audiobook and ebook, and the links are below this video for that. Also, I've been very blessed to hear recently that my private channeling is blowing minds. People are reporting back to me that really did, like it was almost sort of overwhelming how much was in there, how much insight was included, and how it's kind of just sort of blown apart many of the concepts they held about themselves and their lives and so on. So if you would like to have your mind blown, well, there are two ways you can do it. You can either read this book or you can have a private channeling with me, and both of them are quite likely going to blow your mind. It's also possible now to leave a small donation for me if you would like to contribute to keeping the lights on and food my belly so I can continue to deliver these channelings week after week with love. You go below and you'll see there's a link. One of those links goes to Subscribe Style, where you can subscribe on a monthly basis, or you can send a one-off payment through that same system, or you can use PayPal. On to today's channeling topic. It is how to live with the Master's expanded and long perspective. How to live with the Master's expanded and long perspective. Okay, let's see what's there. Greetings and thank you for the question. How to live with the Master's expanded and long perspective. We pose this question in this session because all of you are on the Master's path. You are on the journey to self-mastery. And so this is an inevitable consideration. It will become your way of beingness, the self-definitions and the understandings which will unfurl in this session, and also as the natural progress of humanity, as it becomes more enlightened of itself, that this perspective, this expanded and long perspective, will become your perspective. So, this is your opportunity to get a head start, to understand it before the greater proportions of this single being which you are also come to a level of understanding which you will possess by the end of this session. And more so, this expanded and long perspective is a vessel of healing for humanity, and by extension of the planet. So, it is very worthwhile for you to understand this, and then for you to be the demonstrative and the energetic exemplification of this way of living. And those around you will naturally begin to resonate with the wisdom of being this way, because it will start the vibration within themselves of this knowing they already contain, and yet has not entered into their conscious understanding. They have not expanded enough so that that part of the wisdom is now included within their consciousness bubble. But if you can begin that resonance, then this will very naturally draw them into a larger definition of self, where now more of their infinite wisdom is contained within their bubble of consciousness. And you will have a very similar experience from watching this channel. So, you are a component of a group being, and that group being is a component of yet a larger group being, and that group being is yet a component of an even larger group being. This is the fractal nature of the One, and even more so than that, you are a group being comprised of group beings. And those group beings which comprise you are themselves also group beings comprised of group beings. And on the decreasing scale, this goes to infinitum. There is no end to this concept of the being comprised of group beings. So, in a very simplified representation of this concept is to say everything in existence is a group being. So, how can this be so? What does this imply? This sounds like a fantastical concept, that you are a group being, because you know yourself just as you, the single identity. But when you consider the ultimate being, the One, then it is very simple to perceive that it is a group being, because you are a component of that group being, and we are components of that group being. The channel is a component of that group being. Everything which is living or not living around you is a component in some way of that group being. So the group being is the One, and that is the ultimate group being. Everything is a part of this one being. And as the all is fractal in nature, then it makes sense that those contained within are also themselves group beings in nature. So, you are part of the special being, which is known as the humanity being. You are a component of this larger being, this larger group being. And the group being, known as the humanity being, is a part of the group being known as the earth being. And the group being, the earth being, is known as a part of the group being the solar system being. And the group being, which is the solar system being, is known as part of the group being, which is the galaxy being. And so this is the increments of self-identity. These are the expanded definitions of self, because if you are part of the group being, which is the humanity being, and the humanity being is part of the group being, which is the earth being, then by extrapolation, you are the earth being. And if the earth being is part of the group being, which is the solar system being, then by extrapolation, you are also the solar system being. And you are also the Milky Way galaxy being. And you are also the one, which you have heard us say many, many times. You are the one. Yet, you are also these other beings simultaneously, because there is only one, and it is all connected. Everything is interlaced, is joined. And so, when this definition, this philosophy is taken down to its most granular detail, you literally are everything. Why this is relevant and pertinent in this discussion of living with the Master's expanded and long perspective is because as you are a component of this expanded definition, the next increment, which is the humanity being, then this means that you are part of an organism which expands a very long time. Because humans have been on this planet already for a very long time. And humanity will continue to be part of this paradigm for much more time. So it is this single being which is expanding a very long period. And you are a component of that. So you can begin to see there is now an expanding perspective, because you are starting to perceive yourself as an expanded being. And there is now a long perspective, because this expanded definition of self lasts a very long time. So, if you are going to live with the Master's expanded and long perspective, then this is the same as saying you are now going to live with a self-definition which is expanded beyond what you see in the mirror. This small definition of self, with the very limited parameters of the avatar that you see when you look in the mirror. And instead, you are now going to perceive yourself as something which is much larger and also is much longer living. You yourself are a single being that is comprised of many individual components, just as the one is a single being comprised of many individual components. Your body has 30 to 40 trillion cells, and each of those cells have their own unique consciousness. It is a rudimentary consciousness, but it is a consciousness nonetheless. And so, these 30 or 40 trillion cells are part of the composition of you. You are a group being. And these cells are comprised of atoms. And these atoms, although not alive as you would know it, they are still fragments of the consciousness of the One. And as they are fragments of consciousness, this is the same as saying that they are beings. They are alive in some definition. So your cells themselves are created by many trillions of individual consciousnesses. So your cells are a group being. And then these atoms have some subatomic particles. And the subatomic particles are themselves fragments of consciousness. So the atom is comprised of a group of consciousnesses. It is a group consciousness. And the subatomic particles can be divided. So the subatomic particles are themselves group consciousnesses. They are group beings by definition. And as humanity will discover, there is no smallest particle. As your technology advances and your spiritual awareness gives you access to higher levels of intelligence, you will begin to realize that there does not seem to be a smallest particle. And so you will make the philosophical decision to see the world in that way, to see the all in that way. Because of course, you will never be able to find the smallest particle, because every particle in existence is infinitely divisible. So, if you are looking at the subatomic particle, that particle is infinitely divisible. This is the same as saying every single particle in the all is a group being. You are very similar to a cell within the humanity being. When the cells within your body finish their life cycle, they will perish, and the consciousness, the energy which animated that cell will return to the place it came, and it will await its opportunity to be recycled. And it will be recycled back into your beingness. This is the same as saying that your cells will reincarnate as new cells within your beingness. You are like the God of your cells, and your cells will continue to reincarnate. Now, if your cells made the decision to live very individualistically, so they did not care about what was going on in the greater environment, they did not identify themselves as being part of this expanded being, meaning they do not see that you in your entirety is actually them. They are part of this expanded definition of self. And instead they decided that they were just going to live in a way which is very selfish, very individualistic, just about them. And we will discuss this concept of selfishness later, because selfishness is not a bad thing. It just depends on the definitions. So, if this cell had a life cycle of perhaps 3 days, and this was very normal for this particular type of cell, and so it decided, I am not going to fulfill my service. I am not going to act in a way which is in service to the greater whole. Because what is the point? What is happening within this greater whole in 5 days from now is completely irrelevant to me, because I will be gone in 3 days. So I will live just totally narcissistically focused on myself. If the cell was to live this way, and all the other cells within this organism were to live this way, you could see there would be absolute chaos within the expanded organism. And there would be problems, serious problems, with the health of this larger organism, to the point where the larger organism would not be able to function, and eventually would cease to be, because of this total incoherence and uncooperation of the individual components within. But this cell, in its very limited view, its very narcissistic and self-focused perspective, is looking very much at the short term, and is behaving as if unaware that it shall perish and return to where it came, but it shall be recycled and return as a new cell, regenerated, reincarnated, to once again be part of the larger organism. However, when it returns, because of the way that it lived prior in these earlier incarnations, it will return to an organism which is in chaos. And therefore, it will live a chaotic life. It will live a life which is steeped in suffering and problems. And it will ask, why? How did this happen? Why do I have to be cursed this way, that I'm born into this toxic environment? But of course, this is because it is living without the expanded and long view of the Master. So it thought it was being smart to live as if all that matters is what is occurring within the confines of this smaller identity, in this smaller life cycle. And this metaphor, of course, is applying to you and all fellow humans in the way that you live your lives now, in relationship to this idea that you are not just you. You are the expanded being. You are a cell of the humanity being. So, if you live just focus in this way, where you are just very narcissistic about the person you see in the mirror, and you do not care about providing service or have been integrated into this larger concept of self, which gives you the longer perspective, then you are contributing to the chaos. You are contributing to the cacophony of your special group. You are contributing to the future breakdown and the future chaos, because you do not act in a service which has a view which goes beyond your lifetime. But this is not how the Master lives. The Master lives in awareness that he or she is the expanded being, is a cell of this single being which lasts a very long time, way beyond the current life cycle that the Master lives. And so, it understands, the Master knows, that if they act and behave in a way which is narcissistic in this lifetime, that is selfish on this smaller definition of self, then they will be reincarnated to inherit the existence which was created through this very limited definition, this very limited perspective on how one can live their life. So, the Master chooses not to live this way, because the Master, taking the expanded and long perspective, perceiving of self as the larger being, and that will live much longer, just momentarily exiting and then returning, exiting and then returning, but every time returning to the same larger being, which is in a state of inheritance of the actions that were taken in the earlier incarnation. Then the Master thinks, I shall act in service now. I shall contribute to the larger whole in a way which will echo into the future, so that when I return in my next incarnation, I inherit the love and the benevolence that I am contributing to this being now. You can see that if all humanity began to think in this way and began to have an expanded definition of self, where each of you perceived yourself not as the single unit, but as the special being, the humanity being, then you would live your lives much differently. Because living selfishly would now be about living in a way which is in service still to the self, but the self will not be this small being you see in the mirror, but instead the self will be the expanded definition. So you will love all of those around you. You will give service to all of those around you. You will care for all of those around you, because all of those around you will be perceived as you. Because this is the truth. The humanity being will be fully awakened once humanity passes into the fourth density. But even though this is when it fully awakens, this is when you will be in possession of your new fifth dimensional way of existing. At the moment, you exist in 4 dimensions, 3 of space, 1 of time. When you pass into the 4th density, your extra dimension, the 5th dimensional way in which you exist, will be unity. You will literally have that as a dimension of self, meaning you will perceive of self as the individual, but also as the group being. When someone asks, who are you? You will literally have 2 answers to that question. I am me, and I am the group being. And this is not a conceptual knowing. You will literally have a visceral understanding, a knowing which can be felt, because it will be occurring within your new dimension of your new dimensional way of being. So, being selfish is not something which is hurtful or malevolent or necessarily a detriment, because it just depends on your definitions of self. If you perceive of self as the expanded being, which includes all of humanity, then when you act selfishly, it could also be considered that you act with great love and kindness and compassion, because you treat all others as they are you. And as this extrapolation of self-identity continues, because this is the march back to the ultimate realization that you are the one, you will realize that you are an expanded being. You will have a larger self-definition. So, first, you will realize that you are the humanity being. You will literally identify as that being. And then the next increment of expanded self-identity is you will realize that you are the earth being. You will literally identify as that being. And then you will realize that you are the solar system being. You will literally identify as that being. And then you will self-identify as the Milky Way galaxy being. And then ultimately, you will realize that you are the one. And at that moment, you will coalesce back into that identity. And the purpose for which you have been created will have been fulfilled. This is the march back to the one across all time. This is the fulfillment of your purpose. This expanded understanding of self in an experiential context, until ultimately returning to the one, and at that moment, the one will know itself experientially to completion through the unique perspective which is you. That is divine purpose fulfilled. So, in this next increment of realization, where you self-identify as the entire planet, you will look at the earth and you will not see the earth as something which is separate from you, or a place that you live, or that just happens to be the rock on which you were born. You will literally look at the earth, at nature, and you will see yourself, because this is a possibility which is going to exist within your 5th dimension, within this extra dimensional way in which you will be able to be. So, when you see yourself as the earth, because this is the truth, you literally are the earth. Because each of these expanded definitions of self are nested within each other, then by extrapolation, you literally are these beings. You literally are the humanity being, the earth being, the solar system being, the galaxy being, the one. You literally are these beings. And these beings literally are experiencing themselves through the unique perspective which is you. So, the humanity being is experiencing itself through you. the Earth being through you, the solar system being through you, the galaxy being through you, the One through you. All of these beings are experiencing themselves through you. They are all increments of self-definition within the ultimate being, the One. So, when humanity, as the humanity being, fully awakens to what it is and exists as a special being, a group being, the humanity being, then it is only a small step to have the realization on a special, wide basis that you are also the Earth being. It is you. You are it. And so this is the same as saying, at that time, the Earth will be covered in a free-willed sentience. Humanity is destined to become the sentience of the Earth. So you can imagine, once this status has been achieved, the Earth will become a purified, pristine gem of the cosmos, because it will be covered in an awakened sentience of itself, which is free-willed. And as you will perceive of the Earth as yourself, then your desire to selfishly self-care will now have expanded beyond just self-caring by giving your kind and loving service to the other aspects of your special group, to now also giving the same love and care to the planet on which you reside, on this expanded definition of self. And so all of you will, in a unified effort, clean the air, clean the water, purify the earth, and it shall return to the status which is harmonic with its rainbow body, with its energetic perfection. So, you can see that when one lives in this way, where they take the Master's expanded and long perspective, that they become a much more altruistic and virtuous being. By definition, by default, this is how it would occur. Because you will have a willingness and a desire to treat these expanded aspects of self with the same demonstration and energy with which you would desire to treat yourself. So you will treat these expanded definitions of self with total and utter virtue, with integrity, honesty, dignity, honor, compassion, caring, loving. And when this is done as an entire species, then things really begin to change. The shift now reaches a velocity which is way beyond what even can be imagined at this time on your planet. You look about you and you see the progress which takes place. But when humanity is operating as the single being, then the velocity of change, the transformation, will be breathtaking, and it will be beautiful and magnificent. You can begin being the precursor for this now by living in this new way. Even though in the third density where you find yourself now, this fifth dimensional access to this way of being where you identify as the unity is not available to you. It is just not a quality of the third density matrix. But you can understand it conceptually, you can understand it intellectually, and you can make the philosophical choice to live that way now, and to live with utter virtue in your treatment of other aspects of these expanded definitions of self meaning the way that you treat all others of your special group, and also the way you treat the planet on which you reside, the planet of which you are a cell. So, you can see that week after week, the theme which comes through in these channeling sessions is to live with sincere virtue, to be the pure being, and to treat all others and act at all times and be filled only with the energies and the qualities of the pure, virtuous being. Because this is what you actually are. However, you are living in a state of non-remembrance of what you actually are. And in this very unique presentation within the solar system being, you were born into a state of spiritual dichotomy, where there is this momentary self-identification with the darkness end of the spiritual spectrum, so that you can experience it, you can play with it, and you can come to the realization that it is not you. I am not that. And bit by bit, slowly, slowly, over many incarnations, you can arrive at the end point, where you have the full and total realization that you are in fact the light and nothing but the light. The being of pure virtue. This is the singularity which cannot be touched while still within the third density matrix. However, when the ascension event occurs, you will pass through the birth canal of ascension, emerging from the singularity into the fourth density state in full possession of this understanding of self, that you are connected to the One, that you are the light and nothing but the light, and that all other individuations of your special group are in fact you. They are an expanded perspective of who you actually are. Live as much as you can in this way now. And this contribution is one of the most powerful contributions you can make, not only to your own evolution and movement towards the calibrated energetics to include it into the ascension and be part of that harvest into the fourth density. It is also the most powerful way that you can serve the expanded definitions of self. When you fill yourself with these energies, which is really just excluding the energies which are not you. When you occlude any identification with the darkness end of the spiritual spectrum, what you're doing is just scraping away the crud, the crust, the garbage on top, which has been shrouding what you truly are. And then you can shine and resonate with the truth, which has always been the truth of you, that you are the pure, virtuous being, which is comprised of nothing but the light. Your energetic state is always a composition of gratitude, peace, happiness, joy, bliss, love, and all of the derivatives and artifacts of this spectrum of the light. And by embodying this truth, you literally invigorate those around you. They will begin to vibrate with a resonance that is being harmonized by you, because this is the truth of your special group. This is the truth of each of you individually. And the truth cannot be denied indefinitely. The truth will always arise to the top. It will always triumph over the denial of the truth. So, live pure, act with integrity, Be a being of love in everything that you do as the increasingly expanded, self-defining being. And now you are living as the awakened master with the expanded and long perspective. Thank you, and we love you.